Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're in the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern. We'd love for you to join us. Come and jump into our chat room. Check out the Facebook. Sign up for the Twitter. Go to the websites and check the blogs. We've got 4 or 5 websites. If you're at the BibleForum.net website, there's access to all of these things. You can also sign up to get the weekly email that explains what we're going to talk about. The pictures are worth everything. The Bible speaks of something called the lie. It's a lie fabricated by the father of lies. His name is Satan, Lucifer. A being who rejected God before the creation of humanity. The most obvious lie he told was the very first lie he told. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 4, you shall not surely die. Go ahead, eat the fruit. God says the day in which you eat it, you'll die. Nah, it's not going to be like that. The idea that human beings are independent creatures living in harmony only with themselves and what they believe to be true is a lie from the pit of hell. We are beings living with someone outside ourselves, someone who made all of this and governs all that we are and how we live. The lie that Satan brought to us attacks the very nature, the very existence of God. The fact that there is a God, one who represents all that's right, good, and just. That there is a moral standard outside ourselves by which we should live. Satan, who is the god of this world, the deceiver, has worked and is working to get us to exalt human nature above God's will, above God's purpose. This philosophy seems okay. In many cases, it seems good or better than what we have. However, it is designed to destroy any genuine wisdom regarding the ultimate issues of life. The Apostle Paul says, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to become wise, they became fools. That's what happened to society. And as a result, the chaos that has ensued flows from the sinful heart of man. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on in our Sunday sermon segment. Look for it in the rotation. But until that, or until we get to that point, I want to talk to you about the State of the Union speech. Did you listen to it? President Trump stood up for an hour and 20 minutes, and he talked to you. It's hard to think of anybody with an IQ above 98 and the time available who did not watch this thing, who did not hear about it, read about it, who has not been lobbied in regard to it. The State of the Union speech was probably the most avoided State of the Union speech on record. It was certainly the most hated, at least by liberals and anarchists and moral deviants. But it was probably the most inspiring to those who love freedom. The litany of accomplishments in 1 year was impressive. The economy rose more quickly and higher than at any time in American history. Unemployment dropped more quickly and probably more lower than any time in American history. African American unemployment is at an all-time low, the lowest in recorded history. And the stock market is up, up, up. It dropped 660 points this week. Last week, running up to and through the week of the speech. Some have pointed to the fact that it was deliberate and it'll come back. But we have seen the largest tax cut and reform in American history. And for all of this, hardly any Democrats clapped, let alone stood. And their obvious message, the American economy, the American social standard, is being destroyed by this man. My friends, I want to tell you that is a definition of insanity. Unless we understand what these people really want, what they really need. These changes, these improvements mean that Americans who want to can now achieve almost anything they set their hearts, minds, and bodies to achieve, which is what the American experiment is all about. Black, white, brown, yellow. No limitations exist except in the minds of those who think they can't. We now have choices in our healthcare decisions. The Veterans Administration is in the process of changing, both in terms of its administration and the number of choices veterans have. It's called the VA Accountability Act. The Democrats have dismissed and condemned every one of these changes. We are now selling more oil around the world than anybody else in the world. We now tell Saudi Arabia what we will or will not pay. In less than 1 year, our military has done what we have been told for 8 or 10 years could not be done. The reclaiming of nearly all the territory ISIS once held and forcing them on the defensive. We no longer release enemy combatants captured on the battlefield back to their units, who, by the way, are still on the battlefield. We no longer tell our enemies what we're going to do before we do it. And we're going to keep Guantanamo open. With the Senate's unanimous approval, we have declared, as far as we are concerned politically, Jerusalem to be Israel's capital city. We will open a temporary embassy there by the end of this year. We will be putting stipulations on the foreign aid we dispense, asking Congress to make sure the money is going only to nations friendly and supportive of the U.S. This administration sees clearly the fundamental flaws in the Iran nuclear deal and the clear pursuit of nuclear weapons by North Korea, something the progressive Obama administration either did not see or did not care about. And for all this, the Democrats sat in that room stone-faced and unmoved. Those, that is, who deigned to attend. There was about a dozen or a score of them that wouldn't come. And then took to the airwaves to mock and to deride just about everything this administration is doing. My friends, this is a definition of insanity. The history of the Democrat Party is dominated by the appeal to the populace, hence the name. Andrew Jackson was the first Democrat to be elected president in 1829. Jackson sought to advance the common man against the corrupt aristocracy. Jackson was a slave owner and actively supported anti-abolitionist movements. Jackson was a colonel in the Tennessee militia, leading troops against the Creeks, the British at the Battle of New Orleans, and in the First Seminole War, which annexed Florida and Spain. As president, Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, which forced members of several Native American tribes, Cherokee, my heritage, Seminole, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, Ponca nations from their ancestral homes in southeastern U.S. to lands farther west. They call it the Trail of Tears for the number of people who died, many of which were children. Now, some of this was the result of finding gold on Indian land, but most of it was simply to make room for the flood of people coming to the United States. Did I mention these were Democrats who did all this? This party was a prominent or proponent for slave ownership across the country for urban workers and Caucasian immigrants. Between 1860 and 1932, Democrats elected only 2 presidents, Grover Cleveland, Woodrow Wilson. It was in congressional elections that Democrats were competitive. A Great Depression and a World War ushered Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt into office and kept him there for 3 terms. During this time, most of what we know as America changed. The financial system, the social system, the international policy changed. Social scientists have noted a slosh from liberal Democrat to conservative Republican about every other election cycle. It's as though Americans know Democrats will give us everything we want, but then Republicans will have to come in and fix it, meaning largely the economy, and get us back on track so we can elect Democrats again who would then give us everything we want. And we have gone back and forth my entire life from the 1950s until today. What do we really want? Freedom from the constraints of reality. The current occupant of the White House is unlike anything or anyone we've ever seen. He's a businessman who has been very successful at making money. His negotiation skills are beyond anything we've seen. Most Americans have no idea what he's doing until we see the result, and it all becomes clear. We read the tweets, hear the outrageous comments, watch what appears to be destructive actions, only to see victory for common sense emerge, and we just scratch our head and say, how did that happen? We seem to forget this man has been doing this for over 40 years. He has negotiated with the best and the worst in the world, from moguls to mobsters. And he has succeeded in building a multi-billion-dollar empire. And his enemies, they just keep underestimating him. It says something about the opposition's arrogance or ignorance. Donald Trump has the ability and perhaps the opportunity to change the way we elect presidents. Given the right circumstances, he could be another FDR, staying in the White House for decades. If we had a global catastrophe that came upon us, I got news for you. There would be a move to keep this man right where he is. His real enemy is both time, he's 73 years old, and treachery. Democrats today are little less than mobsters in terms of politics. It's Democrats who support and sustain illegal immigration. It's Democrats who support and sustain deficit spending. It's Democrats who support our enemies at home and abroad, enabling every form of immoral, destructive social policy you can think of, and a whole raft of things we don't know anything about. Republicans are not exempt. They're not angels. However, they are not as numerous nor as arrogant. Richard Nixon included. He was the worst we'd ever seen. We've seen worse since. If Bill Clinton was president in almost any other time period in history, he would have been judged morally unfit. If he didn't have a Dick Morris, he'd have been a one-term president. If Barack Obama had come along in any other time period, he would have been exposed and rejected, if he ever could get that far. And it is now becoming more and more clear that he was simply a placeholder, a puppet. His value was in his color and ability to make people believe in what he was saying. People who are in a position to know doubt he was even making the decisions for which he received so much credit. Democrats have a winning system. Through their own John Dewey, they changed our education system, successfully dumbing down and propagandizing the last 5 generations. Through FDR and LBJ, they changed our social system. Through Barack Obama, they enslaved an entire class of people, much of which were his own people. Social media bypasses everything. Mainstream media, educators, politicians, even parents. making entertainers our leaders and politicians our puppets. Our teachers and preachers are now the propagandists. Have you noticed how many Republican officials are not going to run for office next time? How long can you bang your head against the wall? How long can you work 100 hours a week and get so little in return? How long can you commute thousands of miles a month away from your family before you realize the kid on the corner with a Twitter account has more power than you do? We believe nationally elected officials are making good money, including their benefits. But these men and women could be doing so much better in the private sector. They do not battle against the other senators and representatives, but against the educational, entertainment, religious, and activist communities. Groups which have far greater influence than any elected official. Groups which provide cover for politicians who can simply wait it out. Listen to what many Democrat politicians have said about the various issues of the day. The Russian interference, the collusion, the graft, the sex, the private server, the Attorney General Fast and Furious scandal, sex, tax evasion, bribes, hush money, graft, election tampering, and that's just in the last 10 years. It doesn't count the unnecessary travel expenses, the lavish spending of just about every government agency, and the drugs. We are watching what may very well be the last great hope for mankind, politically, socially, economically, in the world. And we're a mess, morally. What President Trump is demonstrating is that if people do what they know they should, our system will propel them into the prosperity and safety they want. However, people want to be able to do whatever they believe makes them happy, regardless of the cost. Then they want the government, or just about anybody else, to fix it. I say, welcome to the end of the age. If that philosophy prevails, we're all going down the tubes.